Hello and welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. We're going through the book titled The Secret of Mental Magic by William Walker Atkinson. If you're new to my channel, and if it's the first time that you've landed on this channel through this video and would like to catch up on the previous chapter, please visit my book playlist and you'll be able to access the previous chapter there through the playlist. And to you, my subscribers, thank you so much for being part of my community. I'm enjoying your comments, I'm enjoying our interaction and your recommendations and suggestions. So slowly I will be getting them out on the channel as swiftly as I can get them up and recorded. So this particular chapter, as we're heading into lesson 2, is very, what I would call it, nuts and bolts. And maybe for some of you, getting through this chapter is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but stick with it because there's a lot of golden nuggets in here, especially as we delve into these topics of such esoteric nature. And of course, imagine a title like this, The Secret of Mental Magic. What I am finding that maybe 50, 70 years ago, and well, of course, way past that, there was much taboo into these areas. Not with every culture, but here in the West at least. And it seems that there is a consensus out there now that there are so many avenues of communication with these platforms, and as well as science looking into these esoteric topics of telepathy, mental mind action, what is this mind, and what are these extrasensory, and how are they activated, and also considering that even our government in the past, and it's well documented in one of the CIA reports, they actually put money into the project called Stargate to confirm or deny, does this exist? And I would leave it to you to make your own conclusions what their findings are. So I'll put the link in here somewhere for you in the description of this video. In lesson 2, the author endeavors to address the many evidences of thought transference, and I would probably say that perhaps you in your life have had kind of what you might have thought was a thought transference. He actually renamed it. Instead of telepathy, he called it telementation, and he was justifying his new word by using the root words or going to a root word that allowed him to describe what he was trying to express. And I find that sometimes we all get lost in communication because we're trying to explain sometimes the same thing, but we're using different words. I mean, recently I heard of an author talking about telesensations, and that's how he describes things, the feeling of versus the telepathy. But that's for another conversation, when we all kind of find out that science, philosophy, and religion are trying to get at the same thing, and still we're nowhere closer to understanding the origin of man, or perhaps the origin of this force that is just all pervasive around us, which is what this author also continues to impress in this chapter. Perhaps you've come across someone, maybe I know that I have, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about them and the phone rings. Or something tells you, let's make a left turn, and then all of a sudden you don't even want to look back through the rear view mirror and you find out somebody just crashed, and that could have been you. So it's interesting that there is a force out here that is working with us. And how do we work with that force? That's the question. And in this chapter, there's going to be a lot of nuts and bolts about this energy, and also how to protect yourself also from this energy, perhaps of others. So with that introduction, I'll go ahead and turn the page. The Secret of Mental Magic by William Walker Atkinson. Lesson 2. The Underlying Force. In the preceding lesson, I have mentioned that underlying all of the various phases of the phenomena of mental magic, there was to be found one principle or force. This underlying principle or force is, of course, a mental force, and operates along the lines of the now fully established scientific principle mistakenly called telepathy, but which I have called mental induction. After centuries of doubt, denial, and ridicule on the part of science, it has at last been forced upon the scientific mind that mind transference, or the circulation of mind, is an established fact. The experiments of the London Society of Physical Research have given to the world a volume of unimpeachable evidence regarding this fact of the transference of mental states from one mind to another, and thousands of people have demonstrated to their own satisfaction, by means of private experiments, the truth of this phenomenon. There have been many theories advanced to account for this transference of mental conditions from one mind to another, and we have heard much talk of man having two minds, etc. The theories, in some cases, have been grown top-heavy from the weight of their elaborations. In these lessons, I shall have nothing to do with any theory of two minds, or any similar theory attempting to account for the series of phenomena before us. Personally, I take but very little stock in many of the popular theories on the subject. The just why of things. I have never met anyone who really did know the just why, and I do not believe that anyone really does know. I make this statement advisedly after reading and studying about all of importance that has been written on the subject, and after personal acquaintance with many of the leading authorities. They all have a clear understanding of the fact of the phenomena, but when it comes to the underlying cause, the just what is mind part of the question, they either frankly confess that they do not know, or else take refuge in some metaphysical or fanciful psychological theory and hypnotize themselves and their followers by a flood of words and play upon words. Personally, I believe that this just what is locked in the subject of the just what of life and being. Until we know the latter, we cannot expect to know the former. And so, I for one, have cut loose from all the theories regarding the nature of mind, those soap bubbles with which the grown-up children of science amuse themselves, and all shall make no attempt to formulate one here. You will have to take the fact as I present them, and I prove them by personal experiment. If you want a theory of the nature of mind, make one for yourself, for I have retired from the business. I have learned to say, I do not know. When we don't know, and for that matter, we do not know the just what of anything, no matter how much we may know about the phenomenal side of the thing. Nobody knows just what it is anything. If one knew that what is of a single thing, he would have the key to the riddle of the universe. But he doesn't know and may never know. We know of the existence of electricity, for example, and we know how to use it, manage it, control it, but we do not know just what it is. Do you remember the story of the youth in college who, when asked by the professor, "What is electricity?" he replied, "Well, sir, I did know, but I have forgotten." The professor replied dryly, "Now, isn't that too bad? Here's the only person in the world who ever knew what electricity is, and he has forgotten it. How very sad. What a loss for mankind." And in view of the facts just mentioned, I am able to confess without embarrassment that I do not know the just why or just what is side of the subject of mind. But I do know the laws and principles of its operation, how it acts, and how it may be used, and I shall confine myself to the how side of the subject rather than to the why. The evidences of thought transference. I shall not attempt to offer evidence to prove the existence of the fact of the transference of mentative energy at this time and place. The evidence may be had elsewhere if needed, but I believe that everyone who reads these lessons will have had some personal experience in his or her own life that will render further proof unnecessary. In case, however, such proof is needed, I refer the doubter to the pages of any recent work on the subject or the pages of the reports of the London Society for Psychical Research, the said society being composed of men of worldwide reputation in science and learning, their honesty and capability being beyond question. Flammarion's theory. I shall, however, quote the following passage from Camille Flammarion, the eminent French astronomer who is also an investigator of this subject. He says, quote, "We sum up, therefore, our preceding observations by the conclusion that one mind can act at a distance upon another, without the habitual medium of words, or any other visible means of communication. It appears to us altogether unreasonable to reject this conclusion if we accept the facts. This conclusion will be abundantly demonstrated. There is nothing unscientific, nothing romantic in admitting that an idea can influence a brain from a distance. The action of one human being upon another from a distance is a scientific fact. It is as certain as the existence of Paris, of Napoleon, of oxygen, of Sirius." He further states, "There be no doubt that our psychical force creates a movement in the ether which transmits itself afar like all movements of ether, and becomes perceptible to brains in harmony with our own. The transformation of a psychic action into an ethereal movement, and the reverse, may be analogous to what takes place on a telephone, where the receptive plate, which is identical with the plate of the other end, reconstructs the sonorous movement transmitted, not by means of sound, but by electricity. But these are only comparisons." End quote. Mental states, not thoughts. The entire subject of mental magic rests upon the fact that mental states may be transferred from one mind to another. You will notice that I say mental states instead of thoughts. I do this purposefully because I hold that the most powerful phases of mental action do not rise to the plane of thought, but are far from elementary in nature and belong to the feeling or emotional plane of mind. And I believe that the real force has more to do with desire and will than with thought. I will bring out these points as I proceed. Mentative energy, the real force. At this point, I wish only to call attention to the fact that there is a something, some kind of force, that is generated and then passed from one mind to another, conveying mental states, feelings, emotions, thoughts, etc. with it. Now, what is this something? We do not know just what, as I have said, but we recognize its existence and effects and see that it is a real something. We may not understand its ultimate nature, it's just what is, but we know it is, and we have a right to name it. What shall we call it? What name best fits its characteristics? You may call it what you like, but I propose calling it mentative energy. And the stream or current of this energy I shall call mentative currents. And the process of it's affecting other minds, either by personal influence or by mentative currents, I shall call it mentative induction. And the act of producing this energy I shall call mentation. Let us examine these terms for a moment. My terms of expression. You will notice that all of these terms arise from the word mentation. Now, what is mentation? Let us see. The first part of the word comes from the Latin word mentis, meaning the mind. The second part, ation, is a suffix meaning acting, so the word mentation means mind in action. Then, consequently, we have the following definitions. Mentation, mental activity, mentative, relating to mental activity. Mentate, to manifest mental activity. Mentator, one who mentates. Mentative energy, the energy arising from mental activity. Mentative current, a stream or current of mentative energy. Mentative induction, induction by mentation. Please acquaint yourself thoroughly with these terms, for they will be used very frequently in these lessons. The term mentative current will be readily understood. The word mentative I have defined. The word current means a flowing or passing stream. Mentative induction. The term mentative induction will be readily understood by those familiar with the phenomena of electricity. The word induction comes from the word induce, which means to influence. In electrical science, the word induction is used in the sense of the process whereby one body possessing magnetic or electrical properties reproduces that property in another body without direct contact. In textbooks and physics, a simple experiment is often given students to illustrate magnetic induction as follows. A magnet is so placed that its poles project over the edge of a table upon which it rests. An iron nail or steel needle is held a little distance below the magnet so that it will not actually touch the latter, but will be near enough to be magnetized by induction, that is, without direct contact. The nail or needle will have an induced property of magnetism produced by the current from the magnet, and will support another nail or needle by direct contact. This induced magnetism renders the nail or needle a magnet, possessing all the properties of the original magnet so long as the current flows. And just as a magnet may communicate its properties by induction, so may an electrified body communicate electrical states in another body without actual contact. The textbooks are full of examples to illustrate this law. The theory accepted by science is that the induction is the action of the electrical current through the ether by waves of vibration. And I hold that just as the vibratory waves of magnetism and electricity pass through the ether and produce similar properties in other bodies by means of induction, so do the vibratory waves of mentative energy from one mind pass through the ether and by induction set up similar mental states in the minds of other persons within the field of induction. We shall see many evidences of this as we proceed in these lessons. Telementation. I shall use another new term in these lessons, which it may be as well to explain here at this point. I have adopted the term telementation to indicate the action of the mind over a distance by means of mentative currents, long-range mental influence. The word tele is from the Greek and means far or far off. It uses in telephone, telegraph, etc. are well understood. Some may ask why I discard the word telepathy, which is generally used in the sense of thought transference. My answer is that the term is improper and misleading. Telepathy, according to its root words, really means to suffer at a distance. The word pathy arising from the Greek word meaning to suffer. It may properly be used in connection with the mental transference of pain or disease or similar mental states, but its use otherwise is improper. Notwithstanding its having acquired a secondary meaning, sooner or later it will be dropped. The signs of it are apparent even now. The underlying energy. and to a consideration of the nature of this mental energy or activity, let us begin at the mind itself. As I have said, just what the mind is, no one knows, although nearly every writer on the subject has indulged in a scientific guess at it. The secret remains wrapped up in the secret of the all, which no man knoweth. I shall not attempt to indulge in the metaphysical speculation in these lessons. If you like that sort of thing, there are countless books written on the subject to be found on the shelves of every library in the land. But we must have a beginning for our study of mentative energy, and here it is. Brushing aside for the moment all the theories as to the inner nature of mind, I find myself unable to escape from the conclusion of Spencer and other great scientific thinkers that there is an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. And I believe that all that exists in the phenomenal world is a manifestation of the universal energy. And further, I am compelled to believe that a personal manifestations of mind emanate from this universal energy. Then this universal energy must contain mind. For there is an indisputable law of logic that whatever is evolved as a consequent must be involved as an antecedent. That is, that you cannot get something out of a thing unless that something is already in it. The universal mentative energy. And moreover, I am compelled to think that the presence of mind is perceptible in everything in nature. I hold that there is mind in the plant, else it could not grow and shape itself. And further, I welcome heartily the teachings of the most advanced physical science, which holds that in the atoms and the particles that go to make up atoms, there are to be found evidences of life and mind in operation. And more than this, I welcome as brothers those who assert that as all forms and shapes of material life are seen to dissolve into the ether from which they arose, then consequently there must be mind in the ether itself, else there would be no mind in any physical forms. And so, without asking you to attach yourself to any metaphysical, philosophical, or religious theory or teaching, suit yourself about these things, I must point you to the fact, now admitted by the world's greatest thinkers, that at the last there is to be found an infinite and eternal energy, mentative in its nature, of and in which all things are evolved manifestations. And using this as a foundation, I hold that all the individual or personal manifestations of mind seen in ourselves or others are but centers of mentative energy in the great substance of universal mentative energy. The energy operates like electricity. Whatever mind may be, in its ultimate nature, the leading thinkers on the subject now hold that in its working nature or phase of operation, it seems to work along similar lines to those followed by electricity. Like electricity, the mind undoubtedly has two poles or phases. Like electricity, it travels in currents. Like electricity, it operates by induction. Like electricity, it is vibratory in its nature, and like the higher forms of energy, super electrical in nature, it possesses radioactivity or radiant energy. That is like many other forms of radiant energy. It is constantly throwing off streams of active energy in the shape of rays, vibrations, or waves. Recent scientific discoveries have proven this, and in the next few years, the world will be startled by additional discoveries along these lines. Already, we are receiving hints of mental photographs or radiographs, and before long, we shall have mentimeters that will register the telemental waves. Please mark this prophecy made in January 1907 and see how soon will be its fulfillment. The brain is a transformer of energy. The brain I regard as in the nature of a transformer of the universal mind energy, or possibly as a converter of the energy into thought, desire, will, etc. The brain cannot create. Its office is merely to transform or convert an existent energy into usable forms and phases. Science agrees in the belief that in all brain processes there is an employment of some kind of energy and a burning up of brain substance. And just as there is a constant burning up of the elements of an electrical battery in the production of electricity, so is there a burning up of brain matter in the production of mental activity. And yet, science teaches us that no electricity is ever created. Simply, a portion of the universal electricity is converted or transformed. And I believe that the same holds good in mental action in the brain. The two mentative poles. And now it is time for us to begin our consideration of the two mentative poles. In these lessons, I shall hold to the fact there is evident in the manifestation of mentative energy in any and all forms, two distinct poles or phases. I find myself compelled to coin two more terms for these poles or phases, for there are none now in common use. I shall call these two mentative poles respectively the emotive pole and the motive pole. The word motive means that which acts, wills, moves, chooses, controls. The word emotive means that which manifests feeling, emotion, agitation, passion, sensation, etc. These definitions apply to my use of the terms in these lessons. You will be able to fix these two ideas connected with the mentative poles by thinking of the motive pole as will and the emotive pole as feeling. The two active manifestations of the two mentative poles are as follows. The emotive pole manifests actively as desire. The motive pole manifests actively as will. Desire and will in evidence always. You will find these two phases, desire and will, manifest in every mental action. There must always be a preceding desire and a responding will, even in the production of a thought. One must desire to know a thing and then will to know it before the thought is evolved. The thought is the child of the two parents, desire and will. Think over this a moment. You may not always recognize the two elements because they often follow each other so closely as to seem one impulse. And then again, the desire may manifest outside of the conscious field, but it is always present. And your mind may be so filled with the desire that you do not recognize the action of the will, but it is always there. These two forces, desire and will, are manifest all through nature. Haeckel, the German scientist, in his works along the lines of the most advanced scientific thought, tells us that even in the actions of the atoms, there is evident, 1, the feeling or desire of attraction or repulsion, and 2, the impulse of will responding thereto, causing the action in accordance with the desire. It is a universal law, and its evidences may be seen everywhere. Desire and will in telementation. And in the mind, these two poles play a most important part along the lines of telementation. Not only does desire cause a response of will, but both desire and will are active forces in themselves and act and react upon the desire and will poles of mentality of others. We shall see many evidences of this as these lessons progress. In fact, the entire theory and practice of mental magic depends upon this underlying principle. Your strong desire force is able to rouse the will of another mind in response thereto. It may likewise set up vibrations in that other mind, awakening their similar desires. Your willpower may arouse desire in the mind of another and cause action in accordance therewith. It may also overpower the will of another and lead it captive. Your combined will and desire pouring out in a mentative current may produce a combined effect upon the minds of others by telemental induction. These two poles of the mind are both active and powerful in their effect. Both may be roused into intense activity according to well-known laws, as we shall see. Let us take a few moments' time and consider the subject of desire, force, and willpower before we proceed further. Thought, not the motive power. Those who have studied the phenomenon of mental influence have generally accepted the theory that the effect upon other people was produced by the thought of the sender, and all the teachings upon the subject have been along this line. I, too, fell into this error, and for many years taught of the power of thought, etc., but I have come to modify my views on the question. Of course, everyone who has paid any attention to the subject knows that thought transference is a fact. Telementation being an established reality. But there is a very great difference between the fact that thoughts may be sent and received like telegraphic messages on the one hand, and that persons may be influenced and affected and bent to the desire or will of another on the other hand. It is like the difference between thinking and doing in ordinary life. One may send his thoughts so that another may receive them, but what of this? Where does the doing and compelling come in? It is evident that the real force must be looked for in some far more elementary and vital operation of the mind than logical and reasoning thought. What is thought anyway? Webster defines it as an exercise of the mind in any of its higher forms, reflection, cogitation. Nothing very forceful about this, is there? We must look for something in the mind having more elementary force and power. The moving force of the mind. Let us think a moment. What part of the mind seems to produce the greatest moving power and strength? Is it not chiefly that region of the mind that produces what we call emotions, feelings, desires, cravings, passions? Does not this part of the mind really cause the greatest incentive action on our part? Is not the whole moving force largely summed up in the two words desire and will? Think of this a moment. Why did you do this thing and that thing? Is it because you thought about it by cold logical reasoning and acted upon the impulsive given thereby? Or was it not because you wanted to do it, desired to do it, felt like doing it? Is not always the feeling or desire precedent to and the originator of the action? And as for thought, is it not used merely as a judge deciding on the wisdom of the action and as an instrument to think up the best ways of manifesting the feeling or desire? Think of this, is it not so? Did you ever do a thing, except under compulsion, that you did not desire to do it? And was not the desire the preceding cause of your every action? Desire, the mental inciter. Desire is the great inciting power of the mind. Desire is that which incites to action, and you always act upon the strongest desire, subject always to the restraining influence of the reason, and the restricting or impelling influence of the will. I will tell you more about this wonderful thing, the will, in a moment or two, but let us now think of desire, for that is the real emotive power. Desire originates in the subconscious regions of the mind, and often we can feel her there before the she emerges into consciousness, stirring us up with feelings of vague discontent and unrest. After a bit, gathering enough force, she emerges into conscious field and then begins to demand expression. Now remember that when I say desire, I mean all kinds of desire, high and low. Many people think of desire as only the craving of a low nature, but desire really means a feeling that wants something. And that something may be the very highest aspiration of the human mind. The attracting power of desire. Now, this desire in all of its manifestation has a mighty power of attraction and influence. It manifests as the law of mentative attraction, which is constantly drawing toward us the things we desire, and also drawing us toward them. Not only is this true on the conscious plane, but even on the subconscious. Our desire constitutes our nature, and our nature is always operating a mighty power of mentative attraction. The trouble with the most of us is that we allow our desire force to be scattered and diffused, thereby lessening its attractive power. It is only when we learn the secret of concentration and focusing the desire force by the will that we are able to get results above the average. The will is the director and controller of the desire force, and upon its training and management depends the powerful use of the latter. The effect of desire force. Desire force not only has its effect upon the person and others near him, but it may be, and often is, sent for thousands of miles where it affects and influences others in ways. Desire force is the mighty force which makes many of the forms of mental magic possible. It spreads out from the mind of the person, affecting and influencing others even at other parts of the world, if concentrated and directed by the will. It is a force beside which the X-ray and electricity fade into insignificance. It moves not merely blind, lifeless things, but the living minds, thought, emotions, passions, and actions of men. It is the force that rules the world and its destinies. Like any other great natural force, it is capable of being used for good or evil. It is neither good nor evil. It is either or both, according to the mind in which it originates. The insistent desire. What phase of mental effort is more apt to be a motive force? The cold, lifeless thought about an abstract metaphysical proposition, or a mathematical problem on the one hand, and a warm vital wave of feeling, emotion, or passion such as love, hate, ambition, aspiration, courage, and desire on the other? And remember that these last mentioned all belong to the feeling side of the mind, and all are manifestation of elementary desire. Desire is at the bottom of all feeling. Before we can love or hate, there must be desire. Before we can have ambition or aspiration, there must be desire. Before we can manifest courage and energy, there must be desire. Desire for something must underlie all life action. Desire, conscious or subconscious. Abstract thought is a cold, bare thing, lacking vitality and warmth. Desire is filled with life, throbbing, longing, wanting, craving, insisting, and ever pressing outward toward action. Desire, indeed, is the phase of our mental action that is a motive force. Waves of desire force. And not only does desire incite us to action, move us to accomplish its ends, but it also, when sufficiently strong, surges out from our minds in great waves and clouds of invisible and subtle energy or force, and travels here and there toward the object of its inner urge, affecting, attracting, drawing, forcing the desired thing into submission to its cravings and demand. In the presence of some strong man or woman, that is, in the presence of one whose desire burns fiercely and strongly, and whose will has learned to concentrate the desire force, one may actually feel the impact of that elementary principle of mind as it vibrates in great waves from the brain and nervous system of such a one. Who has not met people who actually seemed to be living desire and will? What desire really means. The source of desire force exists in every person, and it may be developed to a wonderful degree. The desires of many of you, of the majority of the race, in fact, never get further than the faint want to stage. These people wish for things in a faint pink tea way. They never want a thing hard enough to stir their desire force into action and make the thing come to them, or else make it take them to the thing. The majority of the people do not know how to desire. They do not know what it is to be filled with that intense, eager, longing, craving, ravenous desire that fills them with a new and mighty force, and makes them demand things instead of merely asking for them. They are like sheep, pigeons, or rabbits, and sit meekly around while the strong ones of the race, the ones filled with masterful desire, walk around and pick up every good thing in sight. And it serves them right too, for they are not exercising the force which nature has given them for the purpose of self-protection and use. They have had the elementary vigor and virility bleached out of them by the refinements of one phase of civilization, and have nearly lost all that goes to make up manly men and natural women. They have become beggars instead of masters, mendicants of nature instead of masters of her. The forces of nature are at the disposal of the man of vigor and determination and desire. Such a one has but to knock at the door of attainment and have it opened to him. Instead of doing this, the majority of us sit around the doorsteps whining that the door shall be opened to us. In the name of human power, friends, get up and fill yourself with powerful desire. Then march up to the door and smite it fiercely with your mailed fist, demanding masterfully, "Open for me, the master." And lo, it will fly open at your call. The relation of will to desire. I have shown you that desire force is the great mental force underlying the phenomena of mental magic. But desire force without the aid of the will is like steam unconfined and directed, and gunpowder fired in the open air, both wasted energy. The will is the lever and the director of the great power of desire, and without its aid, the latter is almost inoperative and ineffectual. Let us examine into the operation of the will. The will has two offices in connection with desire. These two offices may be spoken as 1, the directing office, and 2, the protecting office. The will acts as the arouser, director, restrainer, concentrator, and manager of the great occult force of desire. What is generally known as willpower is often in reality merely desire power, strongly concentrated and directed to a focus by the power of the will. Remember this, please, for it will enable you to form a better idea of the subject of willpower. Often when you hear willpower spoken of, whatever is attributed to it is really said of and attributed to desire controlled, directed, and focused by will. The effort of the will is operated in the direction of this directing, focusing, concentrating, etc. And in the degree that the will is trained to do this, so is the degree of the willpower of the individual. Not only is the will able to do this, but it is able also to direct the desire force into the mind of other persons, awakening similar vibrations there. And then, by its own power, the will is able to direct the desire force of the other persons into action, taking away that office from the will of the other persons if their will be not strong enough in its protective office to resist the attack. The mentative twins. The idea of willpower is more familiar to the minds of people than is that of desire force. All recognize the wonderful power of the will and know of many instances of great accomplishment by reason of its power. And yet, how few have stopped to consider that unless there was a preceding desire, there could be no manifestation of will. Unless a person desires, that is, wants to do a thing, he will manifest no willpower. But on the other hand, one may desire to do a thing, and unless the will is aroused and applied, no action will occur. Desire arouses willpower, and will may stimulate desire. The two act and react upon each other. The two should work in unison, and the trained mastermind has both under control and pulling well together like a well-trained team. Willpower is more than a mere determination to act, although that mental attitude and action is manifested in willpower. It is a living force. Desire is the sister and will the brother twin, and both together manifest that which we know as mentative influence. Willpower is more than a mere mental faculty. It is a mighty attribute, the influence of which may extend far beyond the mind of the person manifesting it. The greatest feats of the occult magicians depend upon telementation operated by trained willpower. And the so-called great men of history, ancient and modern, had their source of strength in this willpower, which they trained and developed to an extraordinary degree. The mastery of will. The exercise of will shows itself in two ways. 1. The mastery of one's own mind, and 2. The mastery of the minds of others. The second is well nigh impossible unless the first be accomplished. One must first train his mind so that he will hold it firmly in the grasp of the will and prevent it from jumping this way and that way instead of moving ahead to its purpose. When one has so trained his mind to be obedient to his will that it can be held steady and one-pointed, as the Hindus say, then is he in a position to direct his mentative currents upon others to the best advantage. But so long as his mind is in a state of disorganization, one faculty pulling this way and another that way, and so on, he cannot hope to concentrate upon others the force that is being wasted in keeping order at home. When the mind is mastered by the will, then may new territory be conquered. The term willpower is commonly used in connection with the manifestation of firmness or determination. The determined will is known as a mighty factor toward attainment and accomplishment. And I think it well to consider this fact at this point. For back of all outward manifestations of mentative influence along active lines lies this determined will of the individual. The more determined and firm be the will of the individual, the stronger the mentative influence emitted and emanated by him. This statement should not require proof, for its truth is apparent to all who have made a study of man and his powers. It has been recognized by writers in all times. Here are a few quotations that will tend to fix the matter firmly in your mind and create in you a desire to manifest the determined will, the lever that directs and concentrates mentative influence. The testimony of wise men. Buxton said, "The longer I live, the more certain I am that the great difference between men, between the feeble and the powerful, the great and the insignificant, is energy, invisible determination, a purpose once fixed, and then victory or death. That quality will do anything that can be done in this world, and no talents, no circumstances, no opportunities will make a two-legged creature a man without it." Donald G. Mitchell said, "Resolve is what makes a man manifest. Not puny resolve, not crude determinations, not errant purpose, but that strong and indefatigable will which treads down difficulties and danger as a boy treads down the heaving frostlands of winter, which kindles his eye and brain with a proud pulse beat toward the unattainable. Will makes men giants." Disraeli said, "I have brought myself by long meditation to the conviction that a human being with a settled purpose must accomplish it, and that nothing can resist a will which will stake even existence upon its fulfillment." Sir John Simpson said, "A passionate desire and an unwearied will can perform impossibilities, or what may seem to be such to the cold and feeble." John Foster said, "It is wonderful how even the casualties of life seem to bow to a spirit that will not bow to them, and yield to subserve a design which they may, in their first apparent tendency, threaten to frustrate. When a firm, decisive spirit is recognized, it is curious to see how the space clears around a man and leaves him room and freedom." But these matters will be touched upon in others of this book, and I must hasten to consider the manifestations of willpower as the director of mentative currents affecting persons and things outside of the individual manifesting it. Will, the projector of mentative force. As we have seen, the use of the will as the projector of mentative currents is the real base of all mental magic, under whatever name it may manifest. And the phase of will known as telementation is the form the results of which strike the observer with the greatest force. The will currents of a strong man reaches out far beyond the limits of his brain and influences people and things and causes them to be inclined toward his wishes. Many men have worked their will upon others far removed, and much that is known as thought transference, telepathy, mental influence, etc., is really this working of the will currents over space. What occultists have called thought forms, etc., are really manifestations of the energy of the will. Will is a living force that can be projected and operated at a distance. It has a property of reacting upon others and permeating them with a mental essence not their own, unless they repel the invasion or fortify themselves against the aggression. The wonders of will. desire and will are more elementary forms of mentation than thought. They underlie thought. Without desire and will, there can be no thought. Feeling ever precedes thought, and desire and will form the essence of what we call feeling. Many people live almost together on the feeling plane and exercise but little thought. The infant desires and wills before it can think. Desire and will is really the medium from which thought is evolved. A modern writer on mysticism has said, there is no force in the universe except will force, meaning, of course, the great natural force or energy called will, of which desire and will in man are expressions. Desire is a natural force and can be used, managed, controlled, and directed just as can be any other natural force. And what we know as willpower is the positive phase of directed desire. The Orientals have trained and cultivated this willpower to degrees that seem miraculous to the Western mind. And by this trained willpower, they perform the so-called miracles that confound the Western scientists. But even the West has its men of iron will, whose influence is felt on all sides and whose power is openly acknowledged by the public. In the East, these men are generally hermits and sages, while in the West they're generally men of action, leaders, captains of industry, etc. The masculine and feminine energy. Mentative energy is the essence of all mental influence and other forms of the mental control of one person by another. It includes the positive, forcing, impelling, compelling, driving phase called will as its motive pole, and as its emotive pole, it has the attracting, drawing, pulling, luring, charming, fascinating something that we call desire. Mentative energy manifests in the phases of both desire and will, as we generally use these terms, for it is composed of the elements of both. Will may be said to represent the masculine side of mentative energy and desire the feminine side. It may help you to fix in your mind the attributes, characteristics, and nature of these two phases of mentative energy by associating them with the idea of masculine and feminine. I wish that you would learn to think of desire force as the warm, ardent, fiery, forceful energy underlying the manifestations of mentative energy, and of the willpower as the cold, keen, strong, directing, controlling projector of the energy. By fixing these mental images in your mind, you will be better able to manifest the two phases as occasion arises. The directing will, besides its office as the director of the energy, the will serves as very important office as the restrainer of desire force. It, when under control of the I of the person and taking the suggestion of reason and judgment, is able to prevent one from expressing undesirable or hurtful desires. It refuses to project the desire force or to allow the desire to take effect in action. It also turns back the desire upon itself and refuses to allow it to manifest. It is the utmost importance that the individual acquire a mastery of his will, for by doing so he will be able to not only express his desire with the greatest force and effect, but will also be enabled to restrain hurtful desires and to prevent their manifestation upon the plane of action. The protecting will. And the will has still another important office. It acts as a protector. It is the willpower that repels the influence or vibrations of another mind, and which renders its possessor immune from undesirable thought waves of mentative induction. It creates a protective aura around the individual which will turn aside the thought waves or vibrations which may reach him, whether such be sent directly to him or whether they are the vibrations of emanating from the minds of others and unconsciously sent forth. The will, when properly used, act as an insulator for attacks upon the desire pole of one's mind and prevents the vibrations from reaching their mark. And if it be well trained and strengthened, it will be able also to resist the most powerful attacks upon it by the wills of others, and will beat back the vibrations which would force their way into its stronghold to take it captive. Mentative induction. And now let's examine into the subject of the operation of the mentative energy in the phase of its employment, consciously or unconsciously, to affect the minds of others. It is true that this subject will be considered in detail in our lessons on personal influence and telementation, but it will be well for us to take a glance at the general workings at this point. I shall cover the points briefly, the elaboration being made at the proper points in the lessons. In the first place, let us consider the matter of mentative induction. As you have seen in this lesson, the currents of mentative energy flow in vibratory waves from the mind of the individual and act upon minds of others according to the laws of mentative induction. They thus set up corresponding vibrations and therefore corresponding mental states or feelings in the minds of such people. In other words, these vibrations induce or set up by induction in the minds of others the mental states existing in the mind of the mentator. These induced mental states are similar in quality and nature to that in the original mind, but of course they are less in degree, for a part of the original energy has been dissipated in many directions, and then again a certain amount of force is lost according to the degree of resistance in the receiving mind. If the receiving mind sets up, consciously or unconsciously, a considerable resistance to the vibrations, it will either entirely neutralize or repel them, or else rob them of much of their power. If, on the contrary, the receiving mind be in its nature more or less in accord with the vibrations, it will set up little or no resistance, and the induced condition will be very nearly as strong as the original impulse. A little thought will make this plain to you. Mentative currents. The ether, or fine substance filling space, is constantly filled with these mentative currents of all kinds and degrees, streaming out from the minds of all kinds of people. These currents, of course, come in contact with each other and often either combine or else act to neutralize each other. For instance, currents of certain degree or kind of vibration, that is, of a certain mental state, when they come in contact with other currents of similar vibrations, will tend to coalesce and combine, there being a harmony and attraction existing between them. But if they are opposing vibrations, they will antagonize each other and act in the direction of neutralizing each other's force. If they be of equal strength, both will lose power, but if one be much stronger than the other, it will lose only in the inverse ratio of its strength, and the weaker will suffer likewise. That is, the weaker will lose twice as much power as the stronger, and the stronger will lose only half as much as the weaker, supposing that the stronger is of twice the strength of the weaker. Mental atmospheres of places. In this way is accounted for the well-known fact that places, towns, cities, etc. have their own personal atmosphere, which affect persons living in them or visiting them. These personal atmospheres of towns arise from a combining neutralizing, etc., of the various vibrations arising from the mentative currents from the minds of the people living in the town. An average vibration is struck, which is strongly felt by all within the field of induction of that town. A little thought will make it clear to you that this is a correct statement of the mental conditions manifest in various towns, cities, etc., all over the world. Each place has its own individuality, which soon makes its impression on those taking up their abode in it. It is more than geographical and atmospheric condition, although of course these play their part, as we all know. It is the average mental state of the people living in the town that strikes the keynote. The stronger vibrations affect the average and give a mental tone to the place. The best proof of this effect being caused by mental vibrations is found in the fact that two towns only a few miles from each other, each having the same atmospheric and geographical conditions, will manifest entirely different mental atmospheres. Think over this a little, and you will see the truth of the statement. The effect of the mentative vibrations. People often ask, if it be true that the ether is filled with mentative currents, why are we not affected more than we are? The answer is that they are affected more than they imagine, but they are still affected much less than one would suppose at first thought, for the reason that the currents conflict with each other and rob each other of their force. And then again, nature instinctively affords a safeguard and sets up additional powers of resistance. Just as nature protects the hearing sense of those who are surrounded with many and constant noises until they fail to hear anything but an accustomed noise. Just as she operates upon the smelling sense of the chemist until he fails to notice the odors which are most apparent to the stranger entering his shop, so does she give additional unconscious resisting power to people situated within an active field of mentative induction. Bring a person from a quiet place into a bustling, active city, and he is apt to be swept off his feet at first with the spirit of the place. He will either be swept into its prevailing life with an almost irresistible impulse, or else he will be repelled by reason of the inharmonious mentative currents. In either case, however, he will be intensely aware of the vibrations. But the same man, after a time, will fail to be so affected. He will be better able to resist the vibrations and will manage to live with a greater peace and poise than at first, although he will, of course, alter his nature more or less in harmony with the prevailing tone of the place. He will feel the vibrations less as time goes on. Some people have so developed this resisting power that they are almost immune, while others have so little power of resistance that they are swept here and there by each strong wave of mentative energy that reaches them. They are always in some field of induction and being swayed by its vibrations. Waves of feeling. This phase of mentative induction explains the phenomena attendant upon those great waves of feeling that sweep over a country, like the emotion that followed the sinking of the Maine in the harbor of Havana. You will remember the first shock that came to you when you read the account in the morning papers. Then there came upon you a growing sense of some independent event of great moment, mingled with a feeling of horror and indignation, followed by an almost irresistible desire to join in a movement to avenge the outrage. This latter feeling grew perceptibly as wave after wave of feeling passed over the country in mentative currents, setting up increased mental feeling by induction. Older people remember many similar waves that swept over the land in past days. Mentative cyclones. These things are common, and give you a clue to the apparent mystery of the forming of and action of mobs composed of a number of individuals who combine in numbers and then commit acts that no one man of the lot would think of perpetrating singly or individually. The conscience of the mob is apparently a thing apart from the individual conscience of the units composing it. After the excitement, the morning after, many, if not at all, of the persons concerned feel a sickening horror and wonder at their work. A mob is a cyclonic center of mentative currents, resembling a whirlpool or whirlwind with an active center and a less active circumference. The great waves of religious fervor noticeable in communities during the progress of revivals are accounted for in the same way. A few active revivalists start a whirlwind of fervid feeling and emotion, and it spreads out in constantly widening circles, increasing until a climax is reached and then a diminishing strength is apparent, which gradually settles down into the accustomed mental state of the community. These whirlwinds or whirlpools of emotional excitement of whatever kind are, of course, strengthened by the constantly repeated suggestions of those participating in it, which, with the constantly growing volume of mentative energy being thrown forth, serves to add fuel to the fire. This force would go on forever, steadily gaining in strength and volume, were it not for a provision of nature which causes the law of rise and fall, increase and decrease, that universal law of rhythm, to manifest in this as in all else in her domain. Everything has its rise, its climax, and its decline. So far for these general waves of mentative energy or mentative currents, but there is another phase to be considered. Many phases, in fact. Let us examine them. The centers of the mental whirlpool. First, there are mentative currents arising from the strength-centered desire of some person who, forming a strong mental image by means of visualization, creates for himself a center of desire force, which, guided by his willpower, attracts to himself all that will fit into his plans. He constitutes himself as a mentative center around his visualized idea and constantly sends out strong mentative currents charged with the strongest, most ardent thought force, guided, directed, and projected by his developed willpower. He thus sets into operation the great mental law of attraction, of which the early writers of mental science talked so much. These mentative currents, charged with desire, spread out and soon begin a rotary movement like a whirlpool, sweeping around and around, always drawing in toward its center persons and things tending to fit in with the plans of the center. The original desire in the man's mind is reproduced in kind in the minds of thousands of people by the law of mentative induction. And they all fall in with the plan. The degree, of course, depending upon the degree of positivity or negativity of the receptive mind, multiplied by the degree of positivity of the mentator. The great plans of the so-called captains of industry are carried out by reason of this law. Many of these great centers of desire force, these successful men who attract to them that which they want and those whom they need, do not realize the nature of the force that they are using, but there is a constantly increased number who do know it, and they are working it for all it's worth. Many of these steady, cool business leaders are really deeply versed in occult laws. If the true facts of the case were to creep out, they would be the greatest sensation that the country has ever known. Mental influence. Then there is still another phase of the matter. I allude to the case of men who generally consciously, but sometimes unconsciously, are focusing their mentative currents directly upon some person or persons who are necessary to their plans and desires. They are filled with desire to have these persons do thus and so, or not do thus and so, as the case may be. These men, according to their degree of concentration and willpower, direct to the other person or persons strong mentative currents of desire force, and by mentative induction set up vibrations of a corresponding rate in the minds of these others, the degree of effect produced, of course, depending upon the degree of negativity of the recipient. This effect is produced in two ways, both according to the law of mental induction. The first way is to set up corresponding desire vibrations in the mind of the other, so that it will in turn cause his will to carry out the desire. A variation of this is to direct the desire force toward the will of the other and thus entice or charm the other's will into compliance with the desire of the sender. This will be understood if you will remember what I have said about the resemblance of the desire pole to the feminine and the will pole to the masculine. You will see an illustration of this at every point of mentative influence. More about mentative influence. The second way is for the will of the sender to force its way past the will of the other and boldly make love to the desire of the other and endeavor to seduce it by mere strength and persistency until it accedes to his wishes. The variation of this is seen in the case where the attacking will boldly tackles the will of the other and by sheer superiority of power overcomes it and makes it captive and obedient. This latter is very rare, except in cases of personal interviews between the two persons, aided by telementation between interviews. You will notice that the phase in which the desire pole of filamentator does the work is along the lines of feminine action, the force being of a charming, fascinating, drawing, coaxing nature, and where the will is employed, the action is decidedly masculine, the attack being made boldly and with a show of strength, the subtlety of the desire attraction being absent. The giants in the art of mentative attraction combine poles in their attacks and work, and thus, in the words of Uncle Remus, they catch 'em coming and they catch 'em going, like Brer Fox. Personal influence. Then again, there is the use of mentative induction in what is known as personal influence, which we will see in another lesson of this series, the fourth lesson in this book. In this phase, the mentator pours forth his mentative currents, either in a general way or else in a concentrated, directed manner toward the person in a personal interview. This is the secret of what is called personal magnetism, and also of that unaccountable to the uninformed manner which some people have of overpowering others by sheer strength of character. The personal magnetism phase of personal influence is the desire phase, the feminine activity, and the force of character phase is the operation will, the masculine activity. Mental suggestion. Then there is that form of mentative induction called mental suggestion, which I take up in the lesson following immediately after the present one. Although suggestion has to do with words, etc., rather than with mentative currents, still the principle is the same. The mental state is induced by words or physical things which are the result of feeling and mental states, just as is the phonographic record the result of the original speech which it is able to reproduce when the diaphragm is brought in contact with it by means of the needle. And then there's very little mental suggestion that is not accomplished with mentative currents. Very little indeed, if any, as we shall see in the next lesson. Nature's protective armor. Now, in closing this lesson, I wish to caution my readers to refrain from manifesting or feeling anything like fear at what I have said about the use of mentative energy by other people. Remember that fear in itself is the most negative influence and most weakening mental state known. It renders negative the most positive man if freely indulged in. No matter how potent may be these mentative currents, there are none that may not be rendered impotent and ineffectual by your own willpower, set in motion by your own desire force. Each and every one of you have within you and under your own control a force that will render you perfectly and absolutely immune from undesirable mentative influence, no matter who may use it against you. Nature has blessed all of us in this respect. It makes no bane without its antidote, and does not depart from its rule in this phase any more than in any other. It supplies the means of self-protection to everyone, and always furnishes the defensive weapon to match the offensive one. As a matter of fact, you are defending yourself constantly, although you may not know it. Much of this defensive work is done along subconscious lines, but you are doing much of it consciously by the use of your will and spirit of individuality. You are using the mental no all the time. That is, unless you are some poor creature who is afraid to say no, even mentally, and if you are that, then this book is doubly needed by you. The underlying force, self-protection. I shall instruct every student of these lessons in many different ways as we proceed with the lessons in this art of self-protection. No one who studies these lessons need ever again fear any undue influence on the part of others. I propose to make mental masters of you and to teach you to throw off the bonds and shackles of mental slavery. I intend to make you strong, positive individuals instead of weak, negative personalities. There is nothing to be afraid of except fear. So the sooner you cast off fear, the better you will be, and the more advanced on the road to mastery. While this is not the place for exercises, still, I want each and every one of you to start right now and form a mental attitude of fearlessness and strength that you may begin at once to send forth mentative currents of that rate of vibration. If you do so, and you will, I know then you will begin to notice an improvement at once. You will begin to realize your increasing power, and you will also see that others are beginning to feel it. Begin today, this moment, to radiate mentative currents of strength and power in all directions. Stimulate the currents by arousing a strong, intense, burning desire to be strong and to radiate strength, vibrations. Then back this up by the application of a strong, steady, masterful, and dominant will. And then the trick will be done. Learn how to feel and will. But right here, remember, first, last, and all the time, that it is not a mere matter of thinking, but a matter of feeling. thoughts are cold, but feelings are warm, alive, and vital. Therefore, you must not merely think I am strong, or say it like a parrot, but you must stir up your nature to its depths until you can really feel that you are indeed strong and possessed of radiant energy, of mentative force. Feeling is living thought. Everything that is worthwhile was produced by this feeling thought. Feeling, desire, emotion, passion, wanting, willing. These are the things that have creative power, not mere clear, cool thinking. So do not deceive yourself with this holding the thought or any such nonsense of which you have heard so much until you get sick at the mention of the words. It is not simply holding the thought. It is holding the desire and backing it up with the will that does the work. To create a thing, you must want it with a burning, eager want that brooks no denial, backed up by a will that knows no such word as can't or no. Now, get to work. End of lesson 2. If you're getting any helpful golden nuggets out of this lesson, please do leave me a comment, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone that you know may need this in their life right now, and let's head over to the next video where I'll be there with lesson 3.